Hi, I'm Debbie with Inspiration Mixes, a gluten-free baking mix company. Today I'd like to show you how to make cinnamon rolls. Yes, cinnamon rolls, just like my grandmother used to make. Only out of wheat, and ours will be gluten-free. We're going to start with Mom's homemade baking mix. Before you start on your cinnamon rolls, be sure to warm that oven. Turn it on to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and then when it reaches 200 degrees, then just simply turn it off. That way you'll have a nice warm environment for the cinnamon rolls to rise. The first thing you need to do, open the bag because you're going to use the whole box of the baking mix. I like to use a little bit of ascorbic acid, which is crushed vitamin C. You take 1/8 teaspoon. It acts as a natural preservative. It also helps with the lift and assists the yeast in rising better. 2 tablespoons of yeast. You just simply put it in the bag. And as an option, I like to use buttermilk. Now I use buttermilk in the powdered form, so you can just simply put it in the bag and mix it. If you want to use buttermilk in the liquid form, you simply use less water and compensate for the 1/4 cup. So we're going to set that aside. I've placed 1½ cups of water in this pan. We're going to melt shortening. And when I say melt, you don't want it warm because you don't want it too warm that it would kill the yeast. So this is 1/3 cup of shortening. I like to use palm oil shortening, but you can use anything you want. And 2 tablespoons of sugar to make those cinnamon rolls just a tiny bit sweetener. And sugar also helps with the rise in the yeast. So the next step is to make sure you grease a pan. I have a glass 9x13" pan that I like to make my cinnamon rolls in. So I use a spray of oil. It's an organic oil, and I just simply spray lightly in the pan, just so it's covered. And then just set that aside and wait for us to roll out those cinnamon rolls. Now the next step is to put in our apple cider vinegar. It's 1 tablespoon. And apple cider vinegar just gives everything a jump in gluten-free baking. It creates a chemical reaction with baking powder and baking soda. 1 tablespoon of vanilla and 2 tablespoons of applesauce. When you're using the vegan option, you'll replace the 3 eggs with 1/2 cup of applesauce. Still keep in the 2 tablespoons of applesauce. Now the trick is whenever you substitute an egg for an egg replacer, you'll need to put in additional baking soda. Put in 1 teaspoon of baking soda into the dry mix, and that will help create that environment like an egg does. 1 whole egg and 2 egg whites. We're going to drop in the dry mix and put it in the blender just so it moistens it. So we mixed this all together, and I'd like to show you how it looks. It's almost like making a pie crust, so it'll be crumbling. And then we're going to add our water. The melted shortening, 1½ cups of water, and 2 tablespoons of sugar. Now as this mixes a little bit, you're going to want to stop it a couple of times to make sure it's nice and smooth. So we're going to do that. We're going to scrape the bowl one more time. Ooh, it smells good. And I know what those cinnamon rolls are going to taste like when they're all done. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put it on medium, and we're going to let it go for about 2 minutes. We're going to make it nice and smooth. Okay, so now we have finished our cinnamon roll dough, and the next thing I did was I put down a piece of parchment paper a little bit greater than the size of my 9 by 13 pan because we're going to use this parchment paper to roll up those cinnamon rolls. I've placed tapioca flour on here, and as you can see, it is pretty thick. And again, the reason is we're going to be using the parchment paper to roll up the cinnamon rolls after we put our brown sugar, butter, and cinnamon on it. So the next thing I'm going to do, scrape a little, don't be shy on that tapioca flour, and then I'm going to simply pour the batter in the center. This is based off of my grandmother's recipe, who was an avid baker. Her father was a professional baker in Germany. Matter of fact, my kids so loved Grandma Bertha's cinnamon rolls that they nicknamed her the Cinnamon Roll Grandma. Okay, so you can see there's quite a bit of dough there. The next thing, more tapioca flour. Don't use rice flour. Rice flour tends to be gritty. If you can tolerate cornstarch, you can do that. Now I use my pizza roller, but you can use a regular rolling pin. I just like this because I feel like I have a little bit more control. So now I'm going to simply roll this out into the shape of my pan. Okay, there we go. Look at that. Doesn't that look great? Our next step is going to be taking 5 tablespoons of butter. I've melted it so it makes it, it's still warm. You don't want to cool the butter. And I use a pastry brush. My grandmother used to just actually use, when she used wheat flour, she was able to take soft butter and put it on with a knife, but you can't do that with this. So I just kind of gradually pour the butter, and then I spread it out. If you're using the vegan option, you can use margarine. The next thing we're going to do, and my grandmother always said this was the trick to taste that cinnamon in your cinnamon rolls, after you put the butter down, you always sprinkle the cinnamon next. So let's sprinkle cinnamon. And you want to get it so it's very melted into it. Don't be shy with the cinnamon. And see how nice and dark that is, and how the butter has soaked up the cinnamon and turned it dark. There you go. Last but not least is our brown sugar. Now the recipe calls for a cup, but depending on if you're using organic or regular brown sugar, you may use less. Your organic takes about 3/4 of a cup. Whereas the regular, it's a little finer grain, takes a full cup. And you don't want too much because, believe me, this is going to be very sweet. And the brown sugar, if you put too much on it, it's not going to get melty and gooey. So there we go. There is the beginning of our cinnamon roll. Every time I use the spatula to make a cut, I use the spatula also to carefully lift it and put it in my pan. But every single time, because the dough is very gooey, it's very sticky, I put it in the tapioca flour. Sometimes I just put a little bit on the side here, and I do that with it. So here we go. Now the magic is to begin the roll. So you carefully roll it, and you can handle it gently. You gotta make sure that first roll goes underneath. If you have any spots that stick, just take that spatula and roll it forward. I pull it a little bit back because I've taken this all the way to the end of my board. And there we have the cinnamon roll dough, ready to be cut and placed in the pan. Now my grandmother used to always say the ends were scrubbies. So we'll put the scrubbies back for later. Cut them 1 inch. And you carefully pick it up like this and keep it in its round state. Because you notice that they kind of flatten out a little bit, but no worries. You can shape them a little bit when you get in the pan. This will make 12 nice cinnamon rolls. And don't worry about the white that you see, because that will all be gone when it cooks. All right, there you go. And I have some scrubbies. I just put it in a little pan, and I make those. And I love it without the frosting. What do you think of that? Those are going to be scrumptious. So now we're going to put it in that warmed oven. Remember, we warmed it for 200 degrees, turned it off when we started, and we're going to let it rise. We want to rise till it doubles, just like regular bread, and then we'll bake them. We are preheating the oven to 350, and you'll only bake them for maybe 15 minutes. Cinnamon rolls cook extremely fast. So now our cinnamon rolls have cooled just a little bit. It's okay to frost them when they're warm, depending on if you like that glaze or the nice fluffy frosting. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to make a white fluffy frosting to put on our cinnamon rolls. We'll start with a 1/2 cup of butter. And this is a 1/2 stick. And then what I like to do is beat the butter and whip it really good. Okay, so I whipped the butter, makes it a little bit lighter in texture, and then a teaspoon of vanilla. All right, that was easy. Now we're going to add 3 cups of powdered sugar. I usually add about half that amount to begin with, and a couple tablespoons. You can use whipping cream. I love coconut milk. And so that's what we're going to use, just a couple tablespoons of coconut milk. And I use the coconut milk out of the can. There's just something wonderful about the texture that it brings. Okay, let's add the other half of the powdered sugar. So 3 full cups. Another couple tablespoons of the coconut milk. And the whipping cream is really nice. It's my daughter always uses whipping cream because it actually, when you beat it, makes it kind of light and fluffy like that. So then all I do is just start spreading. If you put this on when it's warm, it'll just glaze into the cinnamon and sugar inside the cinnamon roll itself. I like it this way because I like that nice, light, fluffy frosting. Okay, the best part of making cinnamon rolls is eating them. Look at that ooey gooey frosting. Oh my gosh. Oh, that is really good. Check us out on www.inspirationmixes.com. You can check out our website for stores we're located in, and you can also buy us on Amazon.com. From our home to your kitchen, bon appetit.